Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now we're approaching the end of the regular BT era with Yuna and the friends that come along with her banner, and then finally X-Death before we start looking at BT+. But Yuna is definitely not one to be underestimated despite coming to the end of that kind of era. So we're going to take today to have a look at Yuna, what she gets from these banners, as well as the Lufenia event that comes along with her and how to tackle it. Because without Yuna, it's an interesting one. So if you'd like to know more about Yuna, the banners themselves, and of course the event, then stay tuned and keep on watching. Don't forget to check out all of my social links in the description box below as well if you'd like to find me on other platforms such as Twitch, where I stream all of my Opera Omnia clears as well as Final Fantasy XIV and my Final Fantasy count up as well. Don't forget to check out obviously my Discord if you want to find me or other players for Dissidia and lots of other stuff too. And then over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Ultra Flash Flare, who has been a supporter of mine for a very long time now, so a massive thank you goes out to you as well as all of my other patrons. And their title card is a depiction of Alize, who I am also a very big fan of. Now if you'd like a title card just like Flash Flare here has, as well as lots of other benefits, then be sure to click on the link in the description box below, and if you'd like to join up on my Patreon, which I massively appreciate because it allows me to continue to make my videos as often as I do. Obviously don't forget to check out all the other content creators as well for Dissidia and all of the other resources down below as well, because there are lots of people who work very hard on this game just as much as I do. So let's go ahead and talk about the banner, the featured characters, and ultimately what Yuna's rework, LD, and BT give to her. Now there's two banners here, as is normally the case with any kind of BT debut banner. The first of which will contain all of Yuna's kit, so BT, LD, EX, etc. But will also feature Trey's LD. Now I'm not going to talk about Trey or the other two characters because they don't actually get anything new from this particular banner, but Trey is actually a pretty fantastic consolation prize if you don't already have him, and he's still relevant because his LD call is still very good. He's very good with his off-turn damage. He provides instant break. There's a lot of nice things about Trey that would make him quite desirable. As for the other banner, this one will only contain Yuna's BT and not the rest of her kit, but will instead contain Desh and Gao's full kits, and then Gilgamesh EX as well. Now, I wouldn't personally pull here. I think that there are much more pressing banners to be pulling on than Gao and Desh. They're both interesting characters, but I feel they've both had their day in the sun, especially considering that they don't get anything new here, really. I mean, if you've got an absolute surplus of resources, you could throw some tickets here if you really wanted to on the back that there's two LDs here, but the chances are you're probably not going to use either of these two going forward, realistically. So, let's have a look at Yuna. Now, Yuna does get a slight rework here, which actually is very pleasant. So, Izuna gets its extension so that it gives more bravery, and it also doesn't increase turn count either. So, this is actually very pleasant, just because it makes her more turn efficient, because Izuna didn't do any kind of HP damage, but it's still added to the turn count until now. Whereas Cheer gives an HP heal, which is actually very good, and like a really strong HP heal as well, because if you've got the 35 CP passive, this gets expanded to everybody, and then you have an instant turn rate of this, because the increase here will also sort of compound with the ones in her existing passives, and this also doesn't increase the turn count, and the buffs themselves last significantly longer, so realistically you should never run out of Faith's Refuge. So going into what she gets from her LD. Now her LD is actually very good. First things first, it cleanses all debuffs in the party. Izuna obviously already does this, but now there's two ways of doing that, and it makes it so that you realistically shouldn't have to worry about debuffs pretty much at all if you're using Yuna. With the extensions, etc., you're going to get a 3 HP dumping Brave HP attack that's going to hit for split damage across the board. It will grant Valor 4 to Yuna so that you don't necessarily have to rely on her EX to get Valor 4, because previously Valor 4 you'd have to kind of make sure you were using your skills very frequently in order to make sure you could use the EX, but nowadays the EX doesn't actually deal as much damage as the rest of her kit does, and you know, you only really use it now to then expand those, but to extend the Valor 4 buff if you can help it. You also get the Believe LD buff here, which is actually very powerful in the right hands. It increases Party Max Brave, attack, bravery damage as well, just naturally. But if the party doesn't have any active debuffs, which it shouldn't if you're using Yuna, or at least it should be, you should be able to get rid of them fairly frequently, you're going to get more brave damage up on Yuna herself, party max brave up, party attack up, and then party HP damage up as well. So this is like really nice just to give her offensive capabilities on top of the fact that she now heals, cleanses debuffs, batteries, all of that good stuff. Not only that, but Valofor actually gets better attacks if you have the LD equipped. So Sonic Wings is now a 4-hit brave HP attack with 2 HP dumps in it. That increases the party bravery, so you get battery out of it, but it also increases the EX recast gauge where it didn't before, so that you're able to then use the EX if you need to, so that Valofor is constantly active. Because realistically, Yuna without Valofor, not so hot. But you're going to be able to get Valofor up at all times. Energy Ray Plus similarly increases the EX gauge. It is also a 3-hit brave HP attack that is executed twice. You get more bravery back after the first HP attack. You'd be surprised how much damage you can actually get out of Energy Ray Plus, because it's actually the attack you're going to use most often during her burst phase. So her burst phase, typically you don't use her regular skills in. You'll use her LD, maybe her EX, and then you'll use HP pluses, like through either her Energy Ray or Sonic Wings, through Valofor, and you'll actually do a surprising amount of damage doing that, considering that Yuna is actually a support character. But you also, with the sending, get a really, really nice buff from it. So this is like, I personally believe that Yuna can function without her BT, but she really likes having it because it activates her kind of damage phase. It makes it so that like damage dealers don't necessarily have to carry a BT. It's a really nice one because it increases party bravery damage by 30%. And the Brave Cap, obviously, Stolen Brave Overflow, but then if the party has no active debuffs, it adds to her existing buff for party bravery and HP and Brave Cap by another 20%, so that you're actually getting 40% HP damage from just by having that active. So it means that your offensive capabilities are going to be really powerful. Now, a lot of people are of the opinion as well that obviously Y'shtola is coming very soon. Now, Y'shtola, obviously also a support character, lots of damage when it comes to using the burst phase because of Afflatus Misery and the LD rework that she gets with her burst plus. But Yuna and Y'shtola function in quite different teams, because Yuna, with the bravery damage, HP damage, those kinds of caps going up a lot, she is obviously more inclined to work with characters that deal damage. So if you're using somebody like Core or Varn or anything like that, Yuna's going to pair up really well with those characters. Y'shtola, with her BT+, increases brave gains by 50%. So Y'shtola, while doing similar things to Yuna, has obviously access to a BT+ in the first place where Yuna doesn't, but she also augments bravery gains more than actual bravery damage. So they do function slightly differently. And I also want to say that yes, Yuna doesn't have a BT+ coming where Y'shtola does, but you can actually use BTs without BT+ alongside characters that do have BT+. The thing with BT+ is once you've maxed out the BT+ weapon, you get to be able to use the BT attack on its own without actually going into a burst phase. And you can do this in combination with a different character's burst phase. So it doesn't have to necessarily be the same thing. And the joy of Burst Plus is that you're able to compound these things or just extend the burst buff that you get by using the burst phase on the character that's also using the attack on its own. But you can kind of mix and match. So I think that people are misled into thinking that Yuna is just going to drop off the second that Y'shtola turns up, and rest assured she really doesn't, because there's a lot of things that she provides that Y'shtola doesn't, and there's similarly a lot of things that Y'shtola provides that Yuna doesn't. So Yuna can do go really well with a lot of characters that do a lot of bravery damage. I think Core with Yuna is going to be absolutely revolting on the back of the fact that she has a burst phase that does a lot of damage. She increases brave and HP damage very frequently. She's also a character that doesn't take lots of turns to do that, and so therefore the enemy can still act and Core can still go off, etc., while also being buffed by Core. The pair of them together I can see being really quite revolting. Varn also really likes Yuna. There's a lot of characters that enjoy Yuna as a whole, and therefore I think that people who think that she's going to be written off just by going into Burst Plus era, honestly I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what she still has to offer at that time. With regards to Yuna's core abilities and high armor, I actually really like Yuna's core abilities. I think they're very useful. On the back of the fact that they both do the same thing, or they both bring the same thing that you're after to the party, which is debuff cleansing. Both Izuna and Energy Nova do that, and so it means that you can be a bit more manipulative with your party. If you don't necessarily want to take Yuna to the main party, you can still make use of these core abilities. And Esunaga across the board is probably going to be relevant for a very long time, so having 2 lots of it and having the access to it is also very nice. Also, having Yuna's regular call and the fact that Izuna does this naturally as well, but it's something it's always done, so I didn't mention it until now, is it extends party buffs by 1 turn. There aren't very many characters that do that, so if you're wanting to use somebody like Gladio who benefits from party buffs being extended, then they're going to pair up very well with Yuna. Just bear in mind that each individual buff can only be extended once. And then Energy Nova also, for the ride, happens to have Max Brave attack and Party Brave damage up by 20% if you've got no active debuff. So it's just a nice, just a little extra. More damage is always good. And because it does 3 HP dumps, you'll probably get a decent amount of damage out of that as well. But I think that if you're going to be bringing Yuna as a call ability to anything, it's because you want those debuff cleanses. And then with regards to high armor, she has Encouragement Keystone and also has the decency to have 2 C slots. So you can actually augment these by putting Paladin Cecil Spheres on her as well, so that's really fierce. And her wedding dress increases party, brave, and HP damage limits by 10% each. I really like this. I think that it's just really good. If you're going to be using Yuna a lot, then there's no detriment to having this because it is party wide. It's split across the board. It's got a cover-all kind of thing to it. It's just good. Like if you're strapped for ingots for armor, you don't have to have this, but I do think it's a really good one, especially considering that she pairs up with quite so many characters so well, especially damage dealers who benefit from the bravery damage cap increases. I just think that it's a really nice one to have in combination with another blue armor carrier who can then take it even further. So now let's take a look at the story chapter that's going to come along with Yuna as well, and the Lufenia that comes alongside it. So you're going to be fighting 2 Sanctuary Keepers, which are, funnily enough, the Final Fantasy X boss. And these guys are mean. Like, they can be very nasty very quickly, and they're very status heavy, which all Final Fantasy players know from fighting Mulberus for all those years are not very pleasant fights to fight if you don't have the abilities to cleanse or get rid of them. So the orb also wants you to cleanse debuff because it increases the orb by 15 turns if you cleanse a debuff, or while you have no debuffs, the orb goes up +1. So it's maintainable, or if you're in a summon phase or burst phase while you have no debuffs, that's another way to increase the orb. Now, they open the fight with Photon Wings, which is vicious. It's a very heavy-hitting HP damage attack, AoE. There's also going to blind you, stop you, and stop your EX gauge increasing, HP poison you, and stop your buffs from going off quite so frequently by making your enhancements go down. This is mean. You are expected to bring Yuna along to cleanse this immediately. But if you don't have Yuna, there are other options. So if you have like Mog does cleansing with every move that they do, so that's really useful. Balthea can also work here. Just be very careful not to overuse the LD, because LD is the only way that he can realistically cleanse the debuffs in order to be able to do what he needs to do. But once he's at his 5 stacks, he's going to augment the damage of all of your other characters. Similarly, Penelo will also work, and Penelo LD Call can also work for this as well. You're going to need to get rid of these buffs periodically. Now, the reason I say you're going to need to get rid of these debuffs periodically is because of another debuff that they put on you. With like regularly, they'll put the Pursuit debuff on you. Now, what this is as long as that enemy, or as long as that party member acts while they have this debuff on them, the Sanctuary Keeper will then jump turns. Think Eldnash, think Eldnash but used against you, that kind of thing. So you're going to want to get rid of that debuff very quickly as well, and after you've hit them enough, they will just periodically put this debuff on you so that you then need to get rid of it, otherwise you're letting the enemies act very frequently. You can also get around this by, I could imagine that Core, alongside like Warrior of Light and Yuna, will absolutely ruin this, because you can actually use that to your advantage if you wanted to, and just make it so that like you're dealing damage frequently. Just be very cautious of the Lufenia orb, because it will tick down if you've got debuffs on you, so just be careful of that. Once they get past the halfway point, We've seen this with Sanctuary Keepers in the past. They heal themselves for a large amount of HP, and they put an HP regen on them as well. So Faris Call is going to be very helpful here as well, for no other reason than to get rid of that, because you don't want to have to deal with that. HP regen on any Lufenia fight is really nasty to deal with, and they do also, like, having that big defense down on them, they have a lot of bravery damage reduction, bravery gain reductions, things like that, that are really nasty, and they also have attacks that put defense down on you as well, just so that you have debuffs and that you can't just, you know, rely on not having to deal with them. You're gonna have to deal with the debuff periodically in order to keep up with the Lufenia orb. I have actually seen a run that I thought was very fun and interesting, and I remember watching this a while back, and this is a big shout out goes to Stimpy here, and I'm going to leave a link in the description box of this video because I thought it was really fierce, that uses Warrior of Light and Beatrix and Tifa to make, and alongside various calls, to make it so that you have 6 framed buffs up at all times, so that the enemy literally can't debuff you, and then Beatrix is there to get rid of any buffs that they put on themselves, including the HP regen. It's a really fun run, and I really encourage you to make use of that and have a look at it. Realistically, you're going to want a debuffer, or like a debuff cleanser, so if not Yuna, then Penelo, or Balthea, or Mog, or something like that. Then you're going to want some way of resisting damage, whether that be Warrior of Light, or Porum, or even the likes of Setzer with the freeze debuff and things like that. You're going to want to make sure that you're not taking too much damage, and then a damage dealer. So whether that be Varn or Tidus or something like that, then that's your way around that. Now the last thing I want to mention is if you take too many turns in a row, they will put up really nasty things. They put the pursuit up on you, and they also make it so that their HP damage is doubled. So you can get around this by just like keeping on pushing, and I have seen a lot of people doing that, but it is something to bear in mind. Letting them act is a good thing. My plan is probably to take something like Yuna, Core, and then you know, maybe Warrior of Light or something like that, because I do think that the combination of Yuna and Core will absolutely devour this fight. So now we come to the big question of the video: should you be pulling for Yuna or the friends that are featured on her banners? Now, Yuna, I think, is a fantastic character. To be perfectly honest, I was always more excited for Yuna than I was for Tidus. Now, Tidus, obviously, I didn't expect to have quite such a visceral reaction to how much I didn't like him, but Yuna is a character that I love support-based BTs. I genuinely do, and Yuna provides a lot of support capabilities with healing, batteries, HP and bravery damage increases, buffs, auras, all that good stuff. But she also actually deals a fair amount of damage herself, which a lot of support-based BTs we've had in the past, like Warrior of Light and Cecil, didn't. Because she has multiple HP dumps in her kit, as well as being able to augment her own bravery damage through her LD buff. She also obviously brings the debuff cleansing, which is a lovely like niche for her to fill while she's doing all of this other stuff. And I know that a lot of people are worried that because BT Plus is so close, that she's just going to fall off. And rest assured, she really doesn't. And even with Ishtola coming about, who obviously has a really good BT Plus as well, Yuna is not written off by Ishtola because they do actually function quite differently, and Yuna doesn't necessarily need the book, the ingots, etc. that we're going to need for BT Plus going forward, because she has a very self-sufficient BT of her own. So while I think she is very functional right now with just her LD, she is actually very good. If you want her to last for the longest time possible, you are probably going to want her BT. This just makes it so that like you get use of her BT effect while you're making use of someone else's BT plus attack or anything like that. It's just, I think that it's something that would be nice to have. But Agrius is one of the banners that comes along with Yuna, and therefore if you're going to be spending gems to try and chase the BT, I would wait until that banner has been and gone before you start making any decisions on that front. Trey's also nice to have on this banner. Similarly to how Aerith was on Tidus's, Trey's actually very good. He's not used to the level that Aerith was. Like, I swear Aerith is one of my most used LD characters. While I've used Trey a few times, it's not quite to the same level. He's still really good. He's got a really good LD call. He's got instant break in his kit. He's got the massive amounts of off-turn damage, which benefit greatly from percentile damage increases, like Yuna's. So you could make use of that as well. And I think that Trey's a great character. The second banner with Desh and Gal, I would avoid it. honestly. Like, I think they're fine. They're not great characters anymore. They've had their day in the sun. If you really wanted to use them, you probably could, but I wouldn't spend resources on this because after Agrius, most players are probably going to be wanting to save as much as they can for BT Plus era so that they've got a reprieve just before, like the calm before the storm, as it were. And if Y'shtola is like the apple of your eye and you absolutely want to use exclusively Y'shtola and not Yuna to give yourself a reason to save, then while they do function differently, I think the fact that they share a role is fairly apt. So just bear in mind that they do like benefit different teams. Like Yuna has the debuff cleanse, whereas Y'shtola has stone, a little bit of delay, things like that, and obviously bursts of damage as opposed to Yuna's more sort of widespread damage. And then Yuna obviously benefits brave damage dealers, whereas Y'shtola affects brave gains a lot more. So just as long as you're like picking and choosing who you want to use most regularly, then you could hold off on Yuna, but quite frankly, because they function so differently, I don't think there's anything wrong with bonding both of them. And then finally, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to make your voice heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why. So I think that Yuna is a very popular character. She's not loved by everybody, but she is a very popular character, even more so than Tidus most likely, and FF10 is a big love for many. That being said, let's go straight into the numbers. 53% of people said they were going to use gems here, 34% of people said they were going to use 100 or more tickets, 6% said less than 100 tickets, 6% said no. So the vast majority of people who voted here, and once again, a massive thank you goes out to my patrons for their votes and their comments, of course, regarding Yuna, are saying that they're going to pull here in some large way. And I don't think that it's necessarily down to Yuna's character. She is very good, and like she does last longer than people think she does. You know, there's lots of clears where people use her, like she's going to be fantastic for DE Transcendence 4, even beyond that and going into BT Plus era. So let's go into some of the comments. Mark says, I love Yuna's BT animation, and that for me is more than a good enough reason to pull for her. However, for these banners, I'll only be going in with tickets for the LD as I already have Trey and Log. I'll be going hand with gems once the Agrius and Theodore banner releases. So we haven't spoken about the BT animation. It is stunning. The sending looks fantastic. It really does, and I encourage you to make good use of it if you happen to get it. And I think that with Agrius and Theodore's banner, because it's so soon after Yuna, I do think that realistically, honestly, if it were up to me, if I didn't try to clear every event on the day it releases for the purposes of uploading it to YouTube and streaming it, I would not pull on Yuna's banner the day it releases. Because Agrius comes so soon after, I'd actually wait, and then I would go gems on Agrius, Theodore, and Yuna BT, because Theodore, far in the future, gets a really good BT later on as well, and having that LD would be prudent. And then Agrius is fabulous, and we know Agrius is fabulous. So if I were to get the BT on that banner, I would then kind of reassess the situation and go back for Yuna. But realistically, I want Yuna's LD regardless, so I don't know if I'm going to go straight to gems for this or not. Sound off in the comments below. How do you tend to go about these banners when two banners close together come about? Do you hold off and wait altogether, or do you tend to try and go for the LD with your tickets or your gems? Because if you get the BT, then you're going to need the LD, so you might as well gem that. It's an interesting dichotomy, so I'm interested to see what everybody else would do in that situation. Lil May Rose says, I'm absolutely pulling for Yuna. However, I'm only using tickets because I do need to save my gems for upcoming banners, namely Zidane. I haven't gotten any of her kit, so using this to get her up to speed is going to be wonderful. She's also one of the few sources of Ezunaga we have in the game, and if the recent Aurora Lufenia is anything to go by, it's going to be very nice going forward. I think that a lot of people are saving for BT+, which is absolutely fair enough, and I think that while a lot of people are going in for Yuna, then people are hesitant to necessarily go in. Unfortunately, we do have another character between Yuna and BT+, which is X-Death, and X-Death is going to be skipped by a lot of players. I'm probably not one of them because I really like him, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But Yuna is she's got a lot of value going forward. Kobal's said the Queen of Heterochromia gets gems from me, and if she needs them, tokens for the BT. Supports are always good investments, and a support with a solidly damaging burst phase and burst effect are very tempting. It means you're not losing out or not taking a damage focus burst, so it adds a lot of value to DPS characters without a burst like Tifa, so there's a lot to love here. I mentioned Core earlier as a really good kind of companion for Yuna, but this is actually the very reason I love support-based BT characters, because it's quite easy to slot support-based BTs into anything, and if you've got characters that are damage dealers but aren't like BT carries like Core and Tifa, then being able to have a burst phase even though you're taking those types of characters, I find really opens team building, and I really enjoy that because it means that like the supports are out of the way and I don't have to worry about those, so therefore I can kind of play around with the rest of the team and go about it that way, and I think that that's a really fun way of doing it. And then finally Aurelia says, I voted no, but there's a good chance that I will eventually just pull for her. I think that Yuna is one of the most overrated characters in all of Final Fantasy. Her power as a support in OO is certainly not with her amazingly useful rework, but I'm going to see how the events in her cycle go before I make the final decision. If there's a Lufenia that I'm having too much trouble with because I don't have her, then I'll pull for her with tickets. I'm specifically looking at Transcendence 4, but my roster is deep and varied with some strong supports and debuff cleansers on it already. However, it's undeniable that her powerful kit will be a boon for many, and I do admit that her wedding dress is stunning. The costume is everything, let's just say that. And I will just say as well, if you're waiting for Transcendence 4, Transcendence 4 will come out after the end of Yuna's LD banner. So if you're chasing the BT, the banners that you're gonna have left, I don't know if you'll be able to. No, maybe it won't be. Maybe it won't go out like just after, because it's the end of Yuna's like 2-week cycle. I just worry that the dates might not line up. But if you're able to do that, then fair enough, and you'd be able to go in for it that way. Just be careful of keeping an eye on dates for banners as they turn up and as they leave, because the last thing you want to do is realize you need something, like you've gotten a BT and you want to go back for the LD, and that LD banner is no longer there. That's not good. So that's going to be all for today's video. Let us all know in the comments below whether you're going to be pulling for Yuna, or Trey, or Gal, or Desh, or if you're saving up for Ishtola and BT Plus and Zidane and all of that good stuff. Let us know. Obviously, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for any future videos I might be making. And that's going to be all from today's video. So once again, a massive thank you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.